Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently made a pretty candid statement about the situation in Crimea and parts of Donbass, which are currently under Russian control. He openly admitted that Ukraine doesn't have the military strength right now to reclaim these territories, but he's not backing down, far from it. Zelensky believes the West has the leverage to push Russian President Vladimir Putin into negotiations. We can't legally give up our territories. The Ukrainian constitution doesn't allow it. But let's face it, what do those big words mean if Russia is physically in control of these areas right now? Zelensky said during an interview with France's Le Parisien. He went on to say that while Ukraine can't take back everything by force at this moment, Western powers could step up and bring Putin to the negotiating table. Zelensky made it clear, though, diplomacy doesn't mean legitimizing the occupation. Ukraine isn't about to recognize Russia's claim over its land. Instead, he sees negotiations as a way to end the war without further bloodshed. For this, he stressed the need for strong support from the US and Europe to pressure Putin into a diplomatic resolution. This isn't the first time Zelensky has talked about Crimea in a pragmatic way. Back in November, he admitted that Ukraine couldn't afford the kind of heavy losses it would take to forcibly reclaim the peninsula. He suggested then, as now, that Crimea's return might be a job for diplomacy rather than military force. It's an honest and strategic take. While Ukraine continues to resist on all fronts, Zelensky seems to be betting on the West to play a bigger role in shaping the outcome of this war. This is intense. Leonid Slutsky, the head of Russia's State Duma Committee on International Affairs, made a chilling statement after the assassination of General Igor Kirillov, who was the head of Russia's NBC protection forces. Slutsky didn't mince words. He said Russia will not forgive this act and promised that retaliation is on its way. He even drew comparisons to historical events, saying Russia would eliminate the leaders of the Kiev regime, much like they dealt with Stepan Bandera and his associates during the Soviet era. In his words, no one will escape retribution. So what happened exactly? Kirillov and his assistant were killed on Tuesday morning when an explosive device went off near the entrance of a building on Ryazansky Prospect. Not long after, Russia's special services arrested the suspected perpetrator, 29-year-old Uzbek national Ahmad Kurbanov. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Kurbanov reportedly confessed that he was recruited by Ukrainian special services. They allegedly promised him $100,000 in a European passport in exchange for carrying out the attack. According to his statement, he remotely detonated the bomb when Kirillov and his assistant stepped outside. The FSB has already declared that everyone involved in organizing this attack will be tracked down and punished. This isn't just about the loss of a high-ranking official. It's a clear escalation in an already tense conflict. It's hard to ignore how these targeted killings signal a shift in tactics, raising the stakes even higher on both sides. There's growing chatter about NATO potentially stationing European military forces in Ukraine, and if that happens, Ukraine's already fragile sovereignty might just disappear altogether. That's the view of Alexander Stepanov, a military expert and senior researcher at Russia's Academy of Sciences. Stepanov believes that if European troops set foot on Ukrainian soil, it's game over for Kiev's control over its own security policies. The remains of Ukraine's sovereignty will be handed over entirely to NATO, he said in a statement reported by TASS. Apparently, the West is already discussing ways to freeze the conflict and implement a ceasefire. But Stepanov suggests this isn't about peace, it's about cementing NATO's presence in Eastern Europe. By ramping up military infrastructure and pouring in weapons, they're looking to strengthen their foothold in the region. In this scenario, even if Ukraine pretends to maintain some kind of non-aligned status, any territory Kiev still controls would, in practice, be run by NATO. It's worth noting that Reuters recently reported that European countries are considering sending as many as 100,000 troops to Ukraine if a ceasefire or peace deal comes into play. This coalition would likely involve countries like Germany, France, the UK, Poland, and Italy. If this plan moves forward, it's not just about military support, it's a strategic reshuffling of power in Eastern Europe, with Ukraine becoming a key pawn in NATO's broader game against Russia. So, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, openly admitted something pretty interesting. Washington has been trying to change the regime in Iran for over 20 years, but those efforts haven't exactly worked out. He brought this up during a discussion at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, where he was asked if the U.S. should actively pursue regime change in Iran. His response? If you look at the last 20 years, our experiments in regime change haven't been particularly successful, which, by the way, got a laugh from the audience. Blinken linked these failures to the lack of diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Iran since 1980, following the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. He said that without direct engagement, it's tough to understand or influence the complicated dynamics within Iran. According to him, while opposition to the Iranian government exists, it's not as straightforward as it seems. There's still a large conservative faction that supports the regime. He also admitted that the U.S. has tried to encourage societal change in Iran, but making an impact from the outside has proven difficult. The goal, as Blinken explained, has been to empower Iranians who want a different future, helping them communicate, organize, and access resources. It's fascinating how openly he acknowledged these efforts. It's like a rare glimpse into the behind-the-scenes challenges of U.S. foreign policy and the limits of influence, even for a superpower. It looks like Russia has launched another airstrike, and this time it hit Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The strike caused significant damage to infrastructure and residential buildings, making daily life there even more challenging. According to Oleksandr Vilkul, head of the Defense Council of Kryvyi Rih, who shared the update on Telegram, the damage is widespread. Central sewage systems, power lines, and trolleybus routes are all disrupted. Even a hospital wasn't spared in the attack, and many residential buildings were left damaged. Local services are working around the clock to repair the damage, but it's clear this won't be a quick fix. Despite everything, Vilkul added, "Thank God everyone is alive." A small relief in the midst of a grim situation. What stands out here is not just the physical damage, but the symbolism of targeting Zelensky's hometown. It's hard not to see this as more than just a strategic move. It's a psychological one. Russia seems intent on sending a message, but what kind of response they'll provoke remains to be seen. This event adds another layer to the ongoing conflict, showing just how personal and devastating it can get for everyone involved. California is stepping into emergency mode after Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency over a growing bird flu outbreak. This virus, which first appeared in August, has hit over a quarter of all dairies in the state just in the last month. And it's not just the livestock. It's also made its way to humans, with 34 reported cases so far. According to the USDA, 649 dairies have been affected as of Monday, with 313 of those cases happening in just the past 30 days. Alarmingly, 120 were reported in just a single week. This rapid spread has experts and officials seriously concerned, not just about the health risks, but also the economic fallout. Remember, California isn't just any state, it's the top dairy producer in the U.S. So what does the emergency declaration mean? It gives the governor broader powers to act fast, including tapping into more funds to contain the H5N1 virus. This includes helping dairy farms get the resources they need to manage outbreaks, ramping up testing, and improving coordination between government agencies and private farms. What's scary is how quickly this virus has moved. While the strain affecting the cattle isn't the same one that's infected humans in Louisiana and Canada, the overlap in outbreaks is enough to raise some serious red flags. If this keeps up, we could be looking at a crisis that hits everything from food supply chains to public health systems. Bottom line, this is a big deal, and the next few weeks will be critical in stopping this thing before it spirals even further. This case is beyond horrifying. Dominique Pellico, a 72-year-old man from Avignon, France, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for orchestrating one of the most shocking crimes in recent history. Alongside him, 51 other men were found guilty of sexually assaulting his wife, Giselle Pellico, over the course of a decade. Dominique sat with his head down, crying as the judge read the verdict. Unlike him, the other defendants, ranging in age from 27 to 74, received sentences that were slightly lighter than what prosecutors had asked for, but still added up to over 400 years combined. None of the accused were acquitted. The scale of this crime is almost unbelievable. All of the men involved live within a 50-kilometer radius of the Palico home. Dominique had been recruiting them through an online forum called Without Her Knowing on a shady site called Coco.fr. For nearly 10 years, he coordinated these assaults, often documenting them with photos and videos. It wasn't until September 2020 that Dominique's crimes began to unravel. He was caught taking an inappropriate photo of a woman's underwear in a supermarket, leading to an 8-month suspended sentence. But during that investigation, police searched his devices and uncovered a trove of horrifying material. Hundreds of photos and videos documenting the abuse of his wife. This trial wasn't just about justice. It was a moment of solidarity for Giselle. When she left the courtroom, she was met with applause and cheers from hundreds of supporters, her children by her side. Her strength through this unimaginable ordeal has been inspiring, and this verdict is a step toward accountability for the monstrous acts committed against her.